Hello everybody, I'm Ari with Craft Quest, and today we're going to be talking about a dash of diversity, adding diversity in literature and defining marginalized and owned voices. And let's go through introductions. We have Dana, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi. Hey, I'm Dana L. Davis, and I'm the author of Tiffany Sly Lives Here Now.
Maria.
I'm Maria, YA writer, co-founder of Craft Quest, and crazy person. Megan.
Yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Megan. I do several different things. I write YA, I edit, I run or co-run with two other people, the Inkwell Council, which is a critique service, and now I do Craft Quest with everybody, which is awesome.
Oh, I guess I should have added that I am a writer too. And a blogger.
The list is too long. Like every time we have to like do a short bio for stuff, I'm just like, I don't know, just take this.
Yeah, just whatever. I put plus signs instead of and anymore. All right, so let's start with you, Dana, and let's talk about your book, the cover reveal.
All right. What do you want to talk about? Where do we start?
Well, let's start with your cover reveal video, because I feel like that resonated with a lot of people online. How did that make you feel, and what did it mean for you when you first saw the cover of Tiffany Sly Lives Here Now?
Oh, it was super emotional because there was an auction for my book. And one of the things that really resonated to me when I spoke to my editor, TS, is that he seemed to really understand that what I wanted was one of the things I really wanted was to have more Black girls on the cover of magazines. By the way, I'm sorry, my daughter is here. So I just want to let everyone know that if you hear a child screaming, it's my daughter. She's with the senior, but she just all of a sudden just started making noise. So I just wanted to say that. So yeah, one of the things that I felt my editor really understood when I had my first conversation with him was that I really wanted more Black girls on the covers of YA. And that's one of the reasons I chose Harlequin Teen. And so it was sort of like biting nails, like sort of waiting for that moment when they were going to show me sort of the first concept of the book. And so when it came in, it was such an emotional moment for me because I got the email from TS and it just sort of said, okay, check this out. Let me know what you think. And I was like, my heart was beating so fast because I don't know. I just pictured like that they were going to completely like backtrack and it was going to be like flowers or like an ocean or palm trees or anything like not what I wanted. And so I saw this beautiful brown girl and I literally like kind of slumped like in slow motion onto my bed and I just like started crying and I was like, God, this means so much to me because, you know, I was a big reader when I was a kid and that's one of the things I said in the video. And I literally never saw a brown girl on the cover of a novel, at least not one that I was reading. And so I dealt with a lot of self-hate, you know, it didn't happen until my 30s where I started to love my brown skin and I started to love the person that I was. And I just feel so proud to be a part of this movement that's saying, hey, no more, you know, brown girls get to be heroes. And I can't even express enough like what that means to me to be a part of this movement. And I know Harlequin Teen isn't the first publisher to do this, but to me, what it said to me was that they saw the beauty in Tiffany and they believed that she was a hero worthy to be celebrated. And I just had this flash image of these young Black girls, you know, walking through bookstores and seeing themselves represented on so many different shelves. And just to be a part of that, I seriously, I can't put it into words. It's just, if I talk too much about it, I'll start crying again. But yeah, it means so much to me. I say keep them coming. Like my next book, I'm going to be like, yeah, let's do this again. So let's keep doing this.
That is fantastic. And I'll tell you, it really, like I said, it really resonated with me. And, you know, but one of the things, it really got me thinking. I'm sorry, I'm muddling over now because I'm getting a little, you know, it really made me realize, even though I am someone with white skin, when I was a child, there was very little on the bookshelf also that represented me and my culture. Everything we had was American or it was British or Australian. And, you know, there was very little. Now, like you said, not that you were reading. So the books I was picking up, I wasn't in those books. I grew up on the Babysitters Club, the Saddle Club,
Yep, me
Sweet
too.
Valley Twins. Yep. You know, that's what I was reading, even Point Horror at one point when I got to middle grade. So, you know, that really did resonate for me. So piggybacking off of that, let's talk a little bit about own voices and what that means to everybody. And also to define marginalized, because I know there's been a lot of conversation on Twitter. People don't understand, I guess, what these hashtags mean. And I see it come up most often during these pitch parties. So Megan, why don't you start? How do you define own voices and marginalized?
So own voices I would definitely define as at least literature that represents people who have never been represented before. So we're hearing from Dana, we're hearing from you, like just, you know, cultures and types of people that never saw themselves in literature before. And so, you know, the hashtag was kind of started out of people being like, you know, we need these stories. We need to hear stories that are not predominantly white or not predominantly American or not predominantly like, you know, cis hetero people who are saving the world. Like other people can do that too. And like, you know, definitely it resonates when you see covers with, you know, people of different skin and all these things. And like, that's the biggest thing when you see covers with beautiful Black people on them. And it's like, oh my God, like, why have we never had this before? So own voices is kind of like this movement to bring that into literature. And there are definitely some things where, you know, people have tried to twist the hashtag, but the message is we need literature for all kinds of people. In terms of marginalized people, it's basically people who don't basically fall out of like the privileged and the favored, you know, people in society. So there's better ways to define it, but like that's kind of what I take away from it specifically. When things don't will benefit one group of people over everybody else.
I think that was a pretty solid definition. We probably, if we went around the panel, we would probably end up regurgitating the same things.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was pretty solid, Megan. Thank you. So for the writers out there watching today, what we really want to do is, you know, tack down some how-tos when we are talking about writing people of color, people of marginalized backgrounds, people of the LGBTQ community. So Dana, could you maybe give us some pointers on how to write characters of color?
Well, I think that the first thing you can do if you're, you know, a person who is not a person of color and you do want to write diverse characters, I think one of the things you can do is ask the people around you. First of all, write it, get it down on paper. And then I think it's really good to check in with people and ask them like, hey, what do you think of this? I know taking that first step is oftentimes scary. I've had so many writer friends reach out to me, and even when they're reaching out to me to have me sort of be a sensitivity reader, you can tell in what they're saying that they're sort of scared. Like, Dana, okay, just to let you know, this is something I'm trying. Can I get your advice? And it's like, hey, don't be afraid to take that first step and write those characters, and then just check in with as many people as you can check in with. I mean, on the book that I'm working on right now, The Voice in My Head for Harlequin Teen, which is my next book that's coming out next year, I have a Native American character in my book. And I reached out to one of my friends who's Native, and we had like a 2-hour conversation that I recorded. And I mean, I was just soaking it all in. I think he was excited to get my call. He was excited that I wanted to represent him correctly. And so I think that reaching out to your friends, don't be afraid. I think they'll be okay with it. And I think it's a great step to take just to give yourself that comfort. So you don't have to be afraid. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head there, because I do believe that there's fear out there when it comes to writing marginalized characters. I think there's been so much conversation about it, which is fantastic, because this is something that really needs to be talked about. But what I've been finding on the Twitter feed is that a lot of people now are just frightened to the point of not even attempting it, which is the complete opposite of what we need to do, because our world is diverse and our writing should be too. Megan, do you have any thoughts on it?
I I definitely agree with Dana that you kind of need to take that first step and reach out to people. I also think if you're writing any type of character that you're not familiar with, whether it be sexuality or race, go into it being with the right intention. Don't go into it saying, oh, publishing is talking about this now, let me do it. You have to go into it because you want to write about it and you want it to be something that you want your readers to see. And I think, obviously approaching someone with that background is, scary. It definitely is. But if you go in with the best intentions and you're like, hey, I want to do this right and your opinion matters, like obviously there are going to be things that you can't always get right and you won't always know. But if you go in with the mindset that I'm going to listen, I'm going to take it in, I'm going to try and do the best that I can, then I think that's like more than a lot of people are willing to always do. And like I get the fear, like I totally get, like you don't want to mess up, but you also have to take responsibility and be like, if you were doing this, then you need to do it, or you don't, then don't bother if you're not going to go into it with the intent to make it as close as you can get it.
And I think that's really important. I run a vlog called The Anti-Stereotype. And so I really feel like out with stereotypes. So if you are a non-person of color and you're writing a person of color, I really think that you should steer clear of stereotypes altogether. If what you're getting, let's say that you're writing a Black character, if your information about Black people in general is from TV, just know. Just start with something. Just start with something that you know and build upon that. Make it come from something that you're familiar with instead of sort of making it a caricature or something that you think a Black person might be. I think that's really important. So no stereotypes. I think that's the way to start.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with that. And Ari is actually, her current WIP delves into Japanese culture. So Ari, where did you start with the research and, to give people an idea of where you began your research for Reiki?
So I asked Japanese people where I should go. I do understand that it's very uncomfortable sometimes, especially I feel like, as a white person, it is a little uncomfortable to just randomly approach people. I've actually been told by other people, you don't ask those questions. I'm like, how else am I going to know? I mean, who am I supposed to ask? So I asked some professionals that I knew in Japanese folklore who had lived over there. They gave me some contacts. I looked up, we had like 3 Japanese language teachers in our school here, and I just approached them. I knew enough Japanese and some of the formal stuff just from personal research that I could approach them respectfully and ask them, do you have a little bit of time? Can I talk to you about this? It was really important for me to balance what's correct for them culturally now, and that includes their religion, the Shinto. So I really wanted to get a feel for what it meant for them and how they would feel and in their home if they had a kamidana, and just different things. It's really looking at the human side of it, in my opinion. Focus so much on the fact that they're Japanese, focus on the fact that they're humans that have these things, and they are Japanese, but that's not entirely like the whole of who they are, which I thought was nice advice. Made me feel less nervous. So I started by reading and by asking questions, even if it made me uncomfortable, because I would rather ask than offend someone or get it completely wrong or have it, feed stereotypes or do more damage. I wanted to go into this knowing I had a firm understanding of the culture and the people and how to translate that over so that other people can understand it but not feel alienated from it. I don't know if that answered the question directly, but lots of research.
It did. Yes, research, absolutely. And, I think that that's the way to go. That's where you start. So anybody watching right now that is wondering or they're befuddled and they have no idea where to even begin, research is the key to everything.
I want to add real quick, sorry. Just ask questions. Like, ask your friends. I have some friends, like I said, they're Japanese. I have some friends who are African American. I ask them all sorts of questions about their experiences, about, what are stereotypes that people frequently. Don't be afraid to ask. I know it makes you feel uncomfortable, but it's kind of eye-opening and enriching to know, and it'll make you a better writer, make you more aware of what you're writing. So that's
ask if I can just piggyback on that. Ask as many people as you can as well, because everyone's going to have different answers. I had a person ask me once, "What do you prefer, African American or Black?" And that answer, if you ask 10 different Black people, you're going to have 10 different answers. I prefer Black. Some people don't. Some people say they prefer brown. Some people prefer African American. I think that doing your research means asking just more than one person. You definitely do that.
Absolutely, because then, like you said, you're just getting one experience. And as we know, as people, we're all so different. So yeah, absolutely, get a consensus from a big group where possible. And one of the other groups that we talk a lot about as writers are my fabulous LGBTQ friends. So what I'd like to do now is maybe talk a little bit about some stereotypes to avoid, because I have so many friends that will not even pick up a book with an LGBTQ character because they feel so marginalized by the writing. So Megan, would you mind starting us off on our discussion on LGBTQ characters? What not to do and maybe how to, write them correctly?
Okay, yes. Because one of the most frustrating things is when I will pick up a book and I can already tell what they're doing with the queer character in some way. Don't kill them. That's number one. There's the whole trope of, bury your gays, which has been gone on too long, and a lot of books will use the gay person as the person to kill off.
They do that with Black people too.
Yes,
so, yeah.
Yes, they do, which is equally as bad. They're not sidekicks. They're not people to throw around. They are people, and that's definitely like the number one thing that gets me. And it's not even just books; it's pretty much everywhere. But I'm not going to do that, or I'll be here for like 5 hours. The other thing is, for bisexual people. So I identify as bisexual. I tend to lean towards the label queer, but so for bisexual people, they tend to just assume that bisexual people can't be monogamous and that they just like go around having a lot of sex, which is, some people, if they want to do that, that's their choice, but that is not the entire group, and that should not be the only representation. There's also like with people who identify as asexual or aromantic that, that they don't ever want to have sex and they don't ever want to have to do that. I'm like, that's also not true, and you should probably talk to people. And it's just this whole kind of just don't feed into everything you've probably ever seen before. Like, I'm going to go with Dana, and don't take most queer people from TV, especially older TV, and don't take queer people from older books, because that's probably not going to be the best place for you to go either. Similarly, like, talk to people. It's really like everyone has a different story that comes with their sexuality. Every person has a different story on how like they identify, and also sexuality is a very fluid kind of thing. Like, you can identify as one thing when you're younger, and then as you get older, you find, hey, that's not working for you. So I think you have to go into this with an open mind and not just be like, oh, wow, can you suddenly be this when you were that like a year ago? It's like, because I grew up, or like, we found out things that are going on. Like, we're all not the same people we were a year ago or even like before. So I don't see why that's a big deal. But being open to it and asking, questions and just going out there is probably the best way to do it. And also just read good queer literature. There's a lot of books that are coming out that are getting it right, and I think it's important to research that as well.
Fantastic. No, because like I do have a lot of friends in the community, and with my last manuscript, one of the things I did was I gave them a scenario. I had a gay character, and I gave them each a scenario. I took a huge bisection of my friends, and I gave them all the same scenario, and I formulated my queer character all of his stakes, his motivations, and everything, based off of that huge consensus, off of everybody's their own experiences. And that's how I was able to develop that character. So again, like Dana already said, ask more than one person, make sure that you have multiple perspectives. Does anyone else have anything to add to the LGBTQ debate right now?
No.
Yeah, I think it really, whether we talk about people of color or if we talk about the LGBTQ community, it's all diversity. So I feel like the same answers kind of, pan across how-tos, so
I would add one thing. I had a writer friend reach out to me who said, look, I don't have any experience writing diversity. I don't have any experience writing people of color. What is it okay if I just don't even attempt it? And I would say what I told her, which is no, it's not okay. Like, attempt it. Get some experience. I mean, if you can't say that you have LGBTQ friends and family or people of color that are friends and family, something is seriously wrong in your life. So work on that. So put down the pen, stop writing, and like immerse yourself in American culture. So that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Make an effort.
I would also add too that, like, I feel that sometimes when people try to write diverse characters without doing any research or without speaking to other people, they tend to make the one different feature the defining point of the character. So like if they're doing a black character, their whole like definition is how they are because they're black, and like that's important, but they're still people and like they still have experiences. And it goes for queer people too, where like half of the books will be like, oh, I'm gay, we're gonna talk about how gay I am, and I'm like, okay, that's great, but that doesn't make them not people. And I feel like that's where a lot of people fall into a hole.
I want to add on to that, actually. One of my friends, Alyssa, she's pretty open about being in the LGBTQ plus community. And when I was playing with, I mean, it's still in there, putting some LGBTQ, my main character's interested in a female, and I was like, well, be any different? How would I approach it? What can I avoid? And she actually said she's a person who's in love with another person. Like, love is love. It doesn't matter who you love, and to kind of remember how it feels when you're in love, how you feel about the possibility of rejection and any social pressures you might have had, but also to be mindful that the social pressures might be slightly different, would be different for someone else, and just to keep asking. So yeah, definitely don't make it, like she kept saying, don't make the fact that they're gay or bi or whatever the main defining point. They're humans, they're people. In your book, there are other aspects to them. So
yeah, I think that's so well said. It's especially with writing people of color, we don't have to have it be a race issue. Let's just have it be a human issue. Like, let's just talk about different things other than, this is a race issue. Now we have a black character, now we have to have some sort of race issue. It doesn't have to always be that way.
Exactly. And I think too, one of the things, well, it's the main thing, really, when we're discussing characterization and how to develop these fantastic characters, is what shapes them as people. So then you can get, you have to then look at the culture behind the person. If we're talking about America, we're talking about this huge melting pot of culture. And I don't know about you guys, but there's a very different culture depending on what state you're even visiting at the time, or where you're traveling to or where you end up. So that's huge as well. So there's even a cultural, different cultural backgrounds within the United States, whether you're a person of color or a marginalized person, full stop. So I guess that like segues us into culture and how to write it. I'm not American. I'm not an American citizen. I am a legal alien in the United States. I am from Ireland originally, and I have a few things to say about writing culture. So we've all read those romance novels and all those fabulous, books that randomly throw in, or not so randomly throw in, a Scottish hero, or a Japanese samurai hero and all of these great guys. But they fall flat for me always as somebody sometimes from that culture. So I've broken down a few things to think about when we're writing people from another culture. So things that shape society, full stop. So the first thing is family structure. Who rules the roost? So when you're looking at a culture, you have to know how the family is constructed. Is grandma the one in charge of the whole family? Does the whole structure fall apart if grandma's ill? Or, is it a patriarchal society? The second item is religion. Religion is huge, and that can actually define the family structure. The third item is government, how these countries are run, because that can shape people's thought process. Another thing are the economic exports of a country. That determines people's occupations, which can also play into family structure. And then the next is mythology. So a mythology of a culture can shape superstitions, which can shed new light on cultural nuances. Like, for example, I'm from Ireland, like I said, we're a Catholic country, hand on heart, but we are one of the most superstitious people you will ever meet. I'll give a really crazy example. My side of where I'm from, they were building a highway to get from one end of the country to the other. And no joke, the highway's construction was stopped flat for years because the engineers could not agree with the local people. The locals did not want the highway to bulldoze down what we call a fairy tree. All right. There's a lot of superstition around fairy trees, and the highway was actually stopped dead for years. They would not construct this road. They eventually ended up building the road around the tree. So now there's this little tree on the side of a highway that stopped construction for years. So mythology does definitely shape a society. History then is the other. That's the sixth piece. So history determines all of the above. For me personally, what not to do is when you're talking about people from other cultures. Culture is beyond an accent or how somebody speaks. So one of the things I see in some literature that drives me crazy, it drives me absolutely insane, to be honest, is when people phonetically spell out how a character might say something based on a stereotype of a culture that you know. So I've seen that often. Another item are stereotypical phrases that you think people say, but they might not. And then the third is the assumption that the culture that you're writing about is the same as maybe generationally removed immigrants or media portrayals. So what I mean by that is, again, I can only speak for my own culture, but Irish American culture is not the same as Irish culture. There are huge differences. For one, I'm sorry, everybody, we don't eat corned beef and cabbage. That's number one. I'm really sorry. And Japanese American culture is not the same as Japanese culture. Of course, it depends because, my household is going to be very different to somebody else whose grandparents came here or great-grandparents came here, because my son will get a closer representation of actual Irish culture than those other people might have. But that's something huge. So the big want not to's, don't assume, all right, that Irish American culture or Scottish American culture or whatever the culture is the same as the culture of those actual countries. Don't phonetically spell out dialogue as how, in a way that you think somebody speaks, because it's rude. And a lot of the times it's wrong. And don't use stereotypical phrases. We don't say top of the morning to you. I'm sorry, we don't. I've just burst everyone's bubble. I apologize. I really do apologize.
Are you sure?
I'm positive. I'm positive. I have only ever heard an actual Irish person say that in a making fun of the way American tourists say it when they come over. Well, at least my side of the country doesn't say it. I can't speak for any other side of the country. And that's another thing, like we talked about, phone a friend, talk to people, because my experience in Ireland is very different to other people's experience. There are things that we would say that someone from Dublin wouldn't say. There are things that people from Dublin say that we think are very stereotypical Dublin. So even though we're a small country, one person is just a snapshot of a culture, like we already spoke about. So anyone else want to add anything for culture?
That was really well said, I just have to say. Well said.
I could harp on a what not to do, but like Megan said earlier, I'll be here for 5 hours, so all good. You know, but I think it's all related, you know, it's all related. And it's all research, and it's all asking questions, and, you know, talking to people, and, you know, making sure that you have, you know, a good section of what life is like in any character's life, you know. So Ari, why don't we move on to mental health?
Oh, yeah.
Why don't you take it away?
All right, so I'm going to talk about mental health and adding it in literature. I'm not as organized as Maria today. So I guess the biggest thing is these days, more so than when I was younger. Of course, I read a lot of Dungeons and Dragons when I was younger. You used to not see a lot of mental health conditions in books, or if you did, it was kind of extreme or glamorized, or it was kind of all over, or it was clinical. So I'm really happy that I keep finding books every day that have more and more characters who have a mental health condition. But it's, oh God, I'm so nervous today. So a little personal, I have a mental health condition. I have an anxiety disorder. I get really, really anxious. And so when I read a book with an anxious character, sometimes I'll see overemphasis on how the whole world is exploding, and there doesn't seem to be a spectrum of how they feel going up and down. As someone who has it, as someone who knows people who have it, I can only speak from my experience and direct people that I know, but there are ups and downs with mental health. It's not, you know, from page 1 to the end of the book, they're freaking out and everything's crazy, and then they take a magic benzo and everything's great, which happens in books still today. There's overemphasis. A good example would be to look at autistic characters, because you'll find that often misrepresented in literature even today. It's like focusing on the stereotypes of, you know, someone being anxious is, for example, stereotyped as being disorganized. But I have been known to be a perfectionist when I'm anxious, so I get hyper organized and hyper aware of how to, I make lists, you know. So there are stereotypes with each different mental health disorder, and I really encourage writers, if they want to feature a character who has a mental health disorder, to understand that even though it's something that they have and it does influence their life, it is not all of who they are. They have wants and desires and hopes and dreams, just like everybody else. And it's more so like a barrier. It's kind of like just a little obstacle, and everyone deals with it differently. I guess I'll just go down a list of what not to do from my perspective. What not to do is to focus on the defining symptom characteristics of a specific condition. So someone with bipolar, big thing I see, they have mania, they have depression. You never see the little bits in between. I haven't seen it. Other people might have. The ups and the downs, the days that are good, the other things that people want to do. And so it's too much focus on the symptoms being the problem, when sometimes it's not even that. It's just their own perspective of their trying to kind of articulate this in a way that's neutral. Their perspective and how they approach it and cope with it. It's a process. It's an evolving process. So it doesn't matter what condition a person may have. It's always important to do your research. If you don't do your research, you're going to fall prey to just looking at the stigmas and stereotypes of that particular condition, You're just going to write a character who, for the most part, can be described as a character with a mental disorder instead of their journey outside of that disorder. You need to be able to understand that, you know, our basic wants and desires are still in there. And even though our condition may affect that, they still exist separately. You know, you can, I'm going to go on and on and on, but it's very important to do your research, you know, and to ask questions. Approach people in the mental health community, not just people working as professionals, which that would actually give you a good idea of the clinical side of it, but actually talk to people with varying degrees of that disorder. So don't just go and find someone, if you're writing a character who has autism, who just has this one particular, talk to all sorts of people that have varying degrees of that condition, because it's different. It's very, very different. All right, that went on far too long.
No, I think you did that really well. If I could add on to that,
yes.
I think sometimes from the reader perspective, I think readers should sometimes take it easy because if an author will tackle mental illness or a disability like autism, for example, there's 100 different versions of autism. And so I think sometimes readers might become extra critical because their version of autism might not look like what this author tackled. In my book, Tiffany Lives Here Now, there's a little autistic girl in my book whose name is Pumpkin, and she's Tiffany Sly's little sister, perhaps. And I have an autistic child. And so her autism is based on, you know, my perspective of autism, whereas someone might have a different perspective. They might have had a different experience with autism. So I think sometimes as a reader, we have to be open-minded and not go, oh, no, autism looks like this, or anxiety looks like this. Because I think the author should be applauded first for just, you know, trying to tackle it. I think that's great. I think that should be, we should admire that and respect them for that. And sometimes I think that readers can be a little bit hard on authors who do try to tackle those things.
Absolutely. I wanna add that I think when it's done like that and explained like that, it's a good way to approach it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump into because I also have my own mental illnesses. I have anxiety as well. I have panic disorder and I have depression. So a nice, wonderful group. But I definitely feel like there are some books out there that when you see the portrayals of certain mental illnesses, they come across as like, I went to WebMD, I saw the list of symptoms, and now I put it in there for the character. And it's like, okay, sure, by textbook definition, okay, I guess they have depression or I guess they have anxiety, but it's like you were saying, it's not every day I'm anxious from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed. Yes, there are days when I am like that, but like there are also days when I'm not like that, and there are days when I'm doing okay, and there's days where like certain things will get stuck in my head over another thing, and like every experience is different, and that's fine, but it's important to not just make the character what you Googled from WebMD and put in there, and also just like the sort of like fetishization or like the romantic angle of it where people are like, oh, well, you know, if you find love, it'll be better. Or if you find this, it'll be better. I'm like, yeah, that's nice and all, but like I have a partner who loves me very much and I still have depression and anxiety. So if it was that easy, I really would like to know, but that's the other thing.
And also I would say, don't try to cure your person in your 300-page novel.
Yes.
It's just kind of absurd. Yeah, so when we were shopping Tiffany Lives Here Now, we had some editors make comments about my autistic character and what was the resolve for her? How are we going to fix Pumpkin's autism? And as a parent who's been battling autism for 7 years, I know that there is no fix for it. And so I wasn't going to attempt to fix this character's autism. So I think that authors who do try to do that, I think, it can be a mistake because I think sometimes mental illness, disabilities are a lifetime battle. And so we can lay the foundation in a book for how to make things better, but trying to fix it or cure it just doesn't come off as authentic.
No. Yeah, and I have seen that too, where, you know, they get a medication and then suddenly all the symptoms go away and then they go on to live a very nice, fruitful life. And I'm like, yeah, but no. Like, even with medications, you could be popping whatever every PRN you have, and you're still on some level in the back of your mind, it's there. At least with mine, it's always there. Like, I give speeches at school, and people are like, you give really good speeches. I didn't think you were nervous. Inside, screaming, like screaming for help. Like, God, I'm going to mess up. God, I'm going to mess up. But it's understanding that it's not always obvious, too, in books. Like, sometimes it's little things that speak louder to, you know? And I don't know. Yeah, that's very well said. Thank you.
Something that I was going to jump in with, and as everyone's been talking, I kind of had a bit of a light bulb moment, I think. I was actually going to say that I haven't read a whole lot of books with highlighting mental health conditions. And then I realized something. It's probably because I predominantly read some form of fantasy, mostly in YA. And I don't know. I guess, like I said, the light bulb went off. Another thing I don't see a whole lot of in fantasy are marginalized characters, either of color or from the LGBTQ community. And then I got to thinking, because I saw a tweet. And as I recall, it was on a thread about diversity. And I think the question was in regards to, they happen to have people of color in their book, but because it was a fantasy world, they didn't feel obligated. I'm going to use the word. It's not the word that was used, but I guess that's kind of how I read it. They didn't feel obligated to create a culture, or I guess to how we're talking about diversity today, how to write, a marginalized character. And I think that's another thing as well in the fantasy, when we talk about fantasy or sci-fi genres, I don't see a whole lot of mental health in there either. And I think it's almost a scapegoat excuse, like, because I'm writing a fantasy, I don't have to do that. And I'm not just talking about, writers that are trying to write, and, we're all trying to get there. I'm talking about like actual published works. So, and for me personally, mental health is it's a huge, I feel like we don't talk about it enough as a society. I feel like everyone is touched with something, either, someone in their lives is touched by mental health, or they themselves suffer. I suffer from anxiety and depression, and it's cyclical. I can be fine for years on end, and then all of a sudden I need to go back on medication. So I don't know. I know I went off on a tangent there for a hot second, but those were just my thoughts. I'm sorry. I probably didn't have much of a point. I guess I realized that I don't see a whole lot of it in the books that I read, because like I said, I predominantly read, YA fantasy, although there are some amazing fantasy books that came out last year that are coming out this year that highlight a lot of those issues. And they're on my TBR. So I'll definitely, get to reading them. But do you guys have any thoughts on that? Am I alone in this?
I have a few. One is, I can give you some book recommendations because I look out for all of these things. So I'll send you messages after this. Two is, I think I know what thread you were talking about, but it also could have just been several threads, because I know we've been talking about this recently. But there is this idea, or at least this really horrible idea, that because you write fantasy, like, you don't need to include, they'll justify it as like, oh, well, like, I don't really need to include other types of people. And then the comeback to that is, you are writing fantasy. You have dragons and you have magic, but people of color or queer people are really the things that you can't do in fantasy. And that usually, ignites some fires, but that's also my response. It's like, oh, is it really that hard for you? Like, you can conceive dragons that don't, like, tangibly exist in the world, but putting in a person of color or putting in a queer person or mental illness, that's where you draw the line. Like, okay. That's kind of not really a point, but that's just my rage about it. But yeah, there you
go. I love it, guys. So there's one more thing we need to talk about. I know we have 15 minutes left, so we'll keep it nice and clean and short. She's like, no. So we're all women on this panel. This has been a huge conversation lately on Twitter. So for our gentlemen viewers out there, how to write a female character. Real quick, who wants to start?
Maria, I think you should start.
Yeah, Maria.
I have Ray.
You did add this one, so it's only right that you go first.
I know. Okay. So, confession time. I don't read a whole lot of books written by guys. Now, I don't know if that's because the industry is predominantly saturated by female writers, which we're not going to get into, Miss Andrea in publishing, or if it's just because I don't gravitate towards those types of books. Megan shared a link right before we got live, we went live here, and I want her to share that message in a couple seconds. But I do feel like women are not. It's like women are written from a male perspective, which I get, and we're all as writers trying to write. We write our truths and everything, but there is some truth to men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And I feel like, again, we have to ask questions, and how would someone react to something? And again, you would have to take a section of friends, family, spouses, girlfriends, whatever it is, and find out how a female would react to something. Also, we don't generally go around checking ourselves out in mirrors and talking about our boobs. I'm just saying. All right, so I'm going to move on to someone else. Megan, why don't you share that fabulous quote just cause? Or the meme.
Okay, background. There was a wonderful Tumblr post about how men write women in books, and one of the lines from the Tumblr post was, she breasted boobily down the stairs. And I just remember laughing for a really long time, because it's just this play on men focusing on, not all of them, like we're not all, but there's definitely this especially I think it's definitely a lot with older literature, but definitely still exists because I've seen it. It's this emphasis on vanity for women and their body type, and all that we think about are our boobs, and like maybe TMI, but whatever. Like the only time I'm thinking about them is when they hurt. So like that's just what I'm saying. Like, they're not constantly in my presence of thought. Also, like having to buy bigger shirts because problems. But anyways, so I just found that really apt of when men focus on the appearance of a woman versus like anything else. Like really, I'll take anything else.
I can screenshare it.
Do you think, sadly, that sometimes female writers do the same thing because maybe they feel like that's what they're supposed to do? Because I have read some books where I have to roll my eyes. I'm like, if she mentions these perky boobs one more time, I'm going to DNF this.
You know what, Tina? Abso-freaking-lutely. Because we have read them. I know that I have read them. And, there's a book I will not name. Because there's a billionaire in that book, and we all know what book I'm talking about. It might have been made into movies.
No, we all know what book you're talking about.
If I read one more about this character's inner goddess, or like you said, her perky breasts, I was going to shoot myself, and that was written by a woman. So yes, that is there, and it's perpetuated.
So we're talking about the Twilight porn. Okay. Actually,
busting that right out.
I was like, there's only 2 options here.
Yes. But I've definitely read it. And it's interesting because we read so much of it that I feel like we become numb to it a little bit. Or how many of these female writers are still writing this trope of, well, my main female character will not understand or know her worth until this guy tells her how beautiful she is. Why are we still doing that? I'm a person. We're all people, and I'm very confused because guys don't go around, they don't write characters where, well, if I find the love of my life will be, fantastic, and I will be whole again. Yet females are writing female characters using that trope, it gets very confusing. So yes, nail on the head.
I would like to add that I do think that it can be done on both sides, and I do think it's like a trying to think of what we talked about in my intro to women's class. So she put up pictures of like women in modeling, and we were talking about literature and how it's always focusing on the femininity of the female form. If you were to put a man in that pose, for whatever reason, people reacted differently and thought it was weird. I thought they were sexy, but that was just me. I totally objectified them. But it's proof that it can happen. It is, I think it's society's ideas of how women are, too, that are affecting this. And on a subconscious level with, women who are doing it. But I definitely think that I think men need to ask women, everybody, not just your like sisters and grandmothers and mothers. Like, I am direct, clipboard, street. Ask people, like, how would you react if this happened? How would you react if someone said this to you? Or in this scenario, what would you do? I mean, there's no harm in asking all sorts of people of different cultures as well to kind of get an idea. And you'll see that I think a lot of it goes back to just these cultural/societal beliefs and perspectives of women and men. I think with men, for whatever reason, the men that I have read, they are even guilty of writing men stereotypically. It's like they're these big, buff, rock hard abs, alpha male. I'm going to go and protect my woman because somehow my primal urges completely obliterate any sort of intelligence. And I'm just sitting there like, no, like that creeps me out. Where's my string bean, like athlete, rugby guy, I don't know. But men can write themselves stereotypically as well. So I think that it all comes back to the research. Look up the history, see how people have been portrayed, and try to understand that we're all diverse and unique. I know women who do not care about their looks. They will go out in their pajamas. I know women who wouldn't be caught dead going outside. I know men. I dated a man actually who straightened his hair and liked to look pretty, and it's totally not what people would expect. And so I hope that writers will do more research and understand that to break out of these little categories we've placed like men and women into. We are more than boobs or wide hips or obsessed thoughts about how I'm not really pretty, but suddenly everyone else thinks I'm pretty. So that's not what we think. I mean, I'm sure we all have insecurities, but it's not just manifested in this sole belief that somehow we're inferior until someone else loves us. It's far more dynamic than that,
Perhaps Jane Austen is to blame. This all goes back to Mr. Darcy.
I'm not gonna lie, I love Mr. Darcy, but it is his fault. It is his fault, and it's all the fault, actually.
It is. He's to blame for everything. Let's be honest about it. But something that you just brought up, Ari, as well. Like when we talk about the heroes in books too, written by women, as well as men, they don't all have rock hard abs. They're all not 6'6". And as much as we love it, I see this oftentimes in like historical romances. I'm sorry, but anyone that has a gym person in their life or goes gymming or knows someone that has the rock hard abs or whatever it might be, knows that to get a body like that involves a lot of protein and hours upon hours in the gym. So do your research. I'm sorry, your historical Scottish Highland warrior was not at the gym getting his rock hard abs in shape. He probably, had a little muscle.
Are you sure?
I mean, I'm just, maybe there was a time machine involved and he was able to like go to Workout World or something. But yeah, I'm pretty sure. So just a drop of reality would be great. Drop of reality would be fantastic. Because otherwise I need to go find these guys because I don't know where they are.
Well, it also conforms to this idea that we are all interested in the same thing, which is some really tall, I like dark hair, but dark-haired, light-eyed Adonis who, even with all his flaws, is somehow still perfect. I don't get it. I love screwed up characters. I want to feel really bad for a murderer in a book. Like, make me feel that, you know? But they get so focused on the physical parts, like even down to like the way he pops off his like buttons or something weird. They made it's like an advertisement. I read a YA book where he was like popping it off, and I'm just like, no one is that.
I will admit,
it's not an advert.
Going off of Ari's point, Nola, like it's so true. I've read YA where the focus is completely on these really like vivid descriptions of things like this. I'm like, what? How do you have that many thoughts around how you're taking off buttons?
Yeah.
For things like I've totally closed books because I just went, I know exactly what's going to happen, and I just can't do it.
Yep.
I mean, even
I'm reading a book right now, and it's written by a woman, and I won't say what book it is, but she keeps mentioning how tall this guy is. Oh, he's so tall, and oh my goodness, he's so tall. And I'm like, if she mentions that he's tall one more time, I'm going to DNF. Because as a person who's 5 feet tall, like everyone's taller than me, so I just don't feel like that's a big deal. But this character's mesmerized by how tall he is. Oh my gosh.
Like, I'd be mesmerized if someone was like 6'9". I'd be like, yeah, wow, you're a really tall person.
I'm right. concerned.
Most people are taller than me too.
Yeah.
I feel concerned. I look at tall people ever since nursing, and I look at them and I think your heart is working double time to pump all that blood through your body. Like, you're gonna have some trouble. I'm serious. Like, my husband's like, would you stop looking at people like their body parts? And I'm like, you know, like I can't turn it off.
Can we bring that into like books now? Like, wow, he was so tall. I thought about how much blood was circulating through his body.
I worried about him.
I think that's a great observation if your main character is a nurse. You know, or like from my
perspective, I want to read.
From my perspective, I am 6 foot tall. So for me, if I was to meet some guy that was like 6'6", that's a big deal for me because I'm looking down on everyone at all times, and you know, a big guy that's 6'6", that's a big deal for me. So if your character's 6 foot tall, then it might be something to mention every couple of chapters.
Yeah, but I feel like you don't have to mention it all the time, though. I mean, once you meet a tall person, they're pretty much
they don't go anywhere.
You're short, they're tall. If they're tall, they're short. You're shorter than they are. So like it should really only be mentioned like once. And I think in the last episode we talked about how you can sneak it in there, like she or he looked up at said person. Like it's implied that obviously they're either sitting down or the person is significantly taller. Like I hate repetitive words, Dan. I hate repetitive words. So when someone says tall like 60 times in a book, I'm done. I can't.
Especially if they're swooning over it. That's a problem for me. It's
that's like, weird.
I don't understand.
Like that's like threatening almost. Like, oh, he was looming, you know, or it's like, oh, so he was threatening her? What's going on? Like, I'm so confused right now. What is happening?
I think that's a good point too. Like the swooning, I think feels like an attraction kind of response. So I think how a writer writes attraction is important too. Like how the character is responding. There have been some books where the woman, for whatever reason, is suddenly self-conscious, but the guy never is, and I've heard this is not true. I've had male friends tell me, like, their first time, very scary. Like, do I have what I need? Do I look okay? They cannot get their buttons to pop off like it's a paparazzi on some sort of car modeling show, you know? It's crazy. I think understanding how attraction works if you're putting in that romance, but also, like, the interaction between people and your thoughts versus what you actually say. There are all these different elements to characters, and for whatever reason, I always see like these really insecure things in the female's head that they never say. I love a good female character who just says awkward crap. Like, thank you for saying exactly what's on your mind, because for whatever reason, I never really see. I've been seeing it more recently, but in adult fiction, not so much anymore. That was my mini rant. I'm done.
I love it. Well, it is 5 o'clock, you guys, and this has been a dash of diversity. I know we could talk like for hours. I love these episodes. I want to thank Dana for coming on. Dana, why don't you tell us just a little bit about Tiffany Sly and when she's out and when we can meet her at last?
Yes, please.
Okay. Let me say first, I had so much fun chatting with you guys. My book is called Tiffany Sly Lives Here Now. And it's about a young girl, 16 years old, who is sort of dealing with life after trauma. She just watched her mom lose a battle with cancer. And before her mom died, she let her know that she had a father that she never knew about. And that Tiffany Sly is, we start off the novel with her moving from Chicago to Los Angeles to live with this father that she never even knew existed. But the day before she leaves, another man shows up saying, I think I might actually be your father. And she has 7 days before she is required to submit to court-ordered paternity testing. So rather than let the family that she's moving in with know about this, she sort of keeps it to herself. And so it's 7 days in the life of Tiffany Sly, dealing with life after trauma, dealing with what that looks like. So Tiffany is suffering from an anxiety disorder. And so we do delve into mental illness in my book. And yeah, I hope you guys check it out. It's really dear to my heart. A lot of Tiffany is me. And it's sort of, I feel sort of like I'm exposing myself, but I'm happy to, you know, because I do deal with an anxiety disorder. And I think so many people are afraid to admit the things that they're dealing with. And so I'm happy to be a part of this movement that's saying, hey, we don't have to be ashamed of our pain and ashamed of our scars and the things that make us who we are.
Awesome. We can't wait to read it. I can't wait to get my hands on it. And I know that CraftQuest is giving away a copy of Tiffany Sly. Ari, do you want to do that now?
Yes. So I pre-ordered 2 copies, one for me, of course, and then one for for the winner. Yeah, I hid that one from Chris. He doesn't know about it. I bought so many books this month. So let me just pull up the page so I can. So this month we decided to do a giveaway to honor Dana coming here and to support her, and pretty much I love the cover. So the cover and the story sound great. The cover does look good. So this month was really hard because so many people retweeted and participated in the giveaway, but we finally got it narrowed down to this month's winner being J.A. Hinton on Twitter. And so we'll put an official announcement on there, and then when it comes out, I believe it's May 1st. Is that correct?
Yes, May 1st.
So when Barnes & Noble to me, I will mail it out to J.A. Hinton. So yay awesome. For books.
Yay for books is right. Fantastic. I want to thank everyone for watching. And like always, this episode will be archived on YouTube for anyone that missed it or wants to share it via Twitter or whatever social media platform that you use. Thanks again to Dana. We love you. And I hope that we are going to see you on the bestsellers list, because I really feel that Tiffany deserves it.
Thank you guys so much. I had so much fun.
She needs to live on the list.
You ladies are lovely. I had so much fun. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So we'll sign off from CraftQuest, and we'll see you guys next month where we talk about the Murphy's Law of writing. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.